3.5 years after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the struggle for the Donbas has become both the heart and the hinge of the war. This stretch of eastern Ukraine, once known for its coal mines and industrial power, is today the blood-soaked ground where Moscow seeks validation and Kyiv fights for survival. Russia's army has launched a renewed push toward Pokrovsk, a key city that could open the gateway to what the Ukrainian military calls its fortress belt, a line of defences running from Slovyansk and Kramatorsk in the north down to Kostiantynivka and Druzhkivka in the south. If Pokrovsk falls, the way to that fortress belt lies open. The Kremlin has been blunt. It wants Ukraine to surrender the entire Donbas as part of any peace settlement. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejects that outright. And yet, as the front grinds on, the question persists. Why is the Donbas so important to both sides? For Russia, the Donbas is a symbol and a stake. It represents what Vladimir Putin calls the historical unity of the Russian world. For Ukraine, it's the wall that protects the rest of the nation from collapse. A young Ukrainian soldier known by the call sign Elvis summed up the feeling at the front lines. So many people have already died for this damn Donbas, and to just give it to them would be extremely wrong. In Washington, President Donald Trump, trying to broker a ceasefire, has proposed freezing the front line where it stands. When asked what he thinks should happen with the Donbas, Trump replied, "Let it be cut the way it is. It's cut up right now. I think 78% of the land is already taken by Russia." You leave it the way it is right now. They can negotiate something later on down the line. But I said cut and stop at the battle line. Go home, stop fighting, stop killing people. That proposal was swiftly rejected by Kyiv. To understand why, it helps to understand what the Donbas truly is. The Donbas region, roughly the size of Switzerland, covers about 9% of Ukraine's territory. It's made up of two administrative regions, Donetsk and Luhansk. Before the war began in 2014, about 6 million people lived there. Today, no one knows the exact number. Whole cities have been emptied by shelling, displacement and exile. The modern conflict began over a decade ago in 2014, when Moscow backed separatist movements in the region following the fall of Ukraine's pro-Russian government. What began as street protests quickly turned into a full-blown insurgency. The battle for Donetsk airport, the siege of Ilovaisk, the destruction of deadliest, each became a chapter in the war's long prelude. Putin has long framed his campaign as a defense of Russian speakers who, he claims, were persecuted by Kyiv. In a speech at the Kremlin, he declared, "We were aware of the unbearable conditions of constant shelling and blockade that the Donbas endured for 8 long years." They opposed the armed coup in Kyiv and fought back against the neo-Nazi dictatorship that wanted to tear them forever away from their historical homeland from Russia. Ukraine sees that rhetoric as a cover for aggression. President Zelensky has made it clear there will be no trade of land for peace. Russia is still unsuccessful in the Donetsk region, he said. Putin has been unable to take it for 12 years. And the constitution of Ukraine makes it impossible to give up territory or trade land. By late 2025, Russian forces control about 80% of Donetsk and nearly all of Luhansk, according to independent assessments from the Institute for the Study of War. The fighting here has been among the bloodiest in the conflict's history. Mariupol, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, all synonymous with devastation. Despite heavy losses, Ukraine still holds Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, two cities that anchor its defense network. But the Russian advance has drawn close enough that evacuations are now underway. Among those fleeing is 86-year-old Svetlana Sergeyevna Kushenko. "I decided to leave because our city is being shelled very often," she said quietly as she boarded a bus. "I am sick. I am elderly. So fear made me decide to leave after all." The Donbas was once the industrial engine of Ukraine, the land of miners and steelworkers, of smokestacks and rail yards. During Soviet times, it powered a vast network of heavy industry stretching across the Eastern Bloc. But the region's importance has changed. What now draws the world's attention is not just coal, but critical minerals, rare earths, lithium, uranium, titanium resources vital for global technology and defense industries. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko warned earlier this year, we have information that unfortunately there is about $350 billion worth of these useful critical materials in the temporarily occupied territory. We understand that these are resources that the aggressor unfortunately has and will be used against us in this fight. Control of these resources could shape not only Ukraine's economic future, but also Europe's strategic independence. Losing the Donbas would mean losing that leverage and much more. Since 2014, Ukraine has built what military analysts call a fortress belt, a heavily fortified strip running roughly 50 kilometers across western Donetsk. It's designed to slow, if not stop, any deeper Russian advance. If that line were broken or ceded in a peace deal, Ukraine would lose its best natural defenses. In plain terms, it would open the road to the Dnipro River and eventually Kyiv itself. There's also the political dimension. Many Ukrainians fear that surrendering the Donbas would reward aggression and invite more. One frontline soldier, Vitaly, put it this way: if we give territory to Russia now, in 6 months or a year, they will gather more strength and advance further into Ukraine. These barbarians will not stop until they are stopped by force. That sentiment runs deep in the trenches and in the capital alike. For Ukraine, holding the Donbas is not just about borders. It's about proving that the country can survive as a sovereign state. For Russia, the stakes are equally existential. The Kremlin has framed the region as part of Russia's destiny, a return of lost lands. Russian state media regularly broadcasts images of flags raised over shattered towns and medals pinned to soldiers' chests. But the cost of that vision has been staggering. Entire cities, Mariupol, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, have been reduced to rubble. Satellite imagery shows neighborhoods flattened, industrial plants scarred, infrastructure in ruins. The Donbas, once a symbol of prosperity, has become a graveyard of ambitions. On both sides, there is fatigue, but also defiance. In Kyiv, the government insists that any ceasefire freezing the front lines would merely invite another assault once Moscow has regrouped. Zelensky's aides point to previous truces, Minsk I, Minsk II, as proof that partial peace only delays further war. Across the border, Russian officials insist that they will not withdraw from what they call new territories. In Putin's speeches, the Donbas is not a bargaining chip, but a cornerstone of national identity. The international community remains split. The European Union continues to send weapons and aid to Kyiv, but calls for negotiation are growing louder, particularly from war-weary economies facing high energy prices and refugee pressures. China has positioned itself as a potential mediator, while Turkey and Saudi Arabia have hosted discreet talks. Still, no formula has bridged the fundamental divide: Ukraine's refusal to cede land and Russia's refusal to leave it. Meanwhile, the people of the Donbas continue to live, or try to, in a landscape that barely resembles what it once was. The sound of artillery echoes across empty streets. Farmers plough fields littered with shrapnel. Children attend school in basements. And families wait for news from loved ones fighting at the front. What's at stake in this region extends far beyond its borders. The battle for the Donbas has become a test of the post-Cold War order, of whether borders in Europe can still be changed by force, and whether the international community has the will to stop it. If Russia secures full control, it will claim victory not only on the battlefield, but in the narrative war-proof, in Putin's words, that the Russian world cannot be contained. If Ukraine holds, it will mark a turning point. The moment a smaller nation stopped a larger one from erasing it off the map. But for now, the front remains fluid. Reports from Pokrovsk suggest Russia is intensifying its assault, using waves of drones and glide bombs to soften Ukrainian defenses. Ukrainian artillery responds daily, but ammunition remains scarce. US officials warn that Kyiv's supply lines could run thin by winter if Congress delays further aid. In towns like Druzhkivka and Kostiantynivka, residents weigh impossible choices: to flee or to stay, to rebuild or to wait. Every new crater, every column of smoke reminds them that the battle for the Donbas is also a battle for memory, for who will tell the story of what happened here and whose version of history will endure. From the coal mines of Luhansk to the ruins of Bakhmut, The region has seen empires rise and fall. The names have changed from Tsarist governors to Soviet commissars, from oligarchs to insurgents, but the struggle has always been over the same thing: control of land, labor, and identity. Now, as winter approaches once again, that struggle shows no sign of ending. Both armies dig deeper, both leaders double down. The Donbas remains the fulcrum of the conflict, the place where the war began, and the place where its outcome may one day be decided. In the words of a Ukrainian soldier standing near Kramatorsk, "We don't fight for Donbas alone, we fight for the right to exist."